In the heart of New York City, on a cool spring night in 1989, an event occurred that would shake the city to its core and expose deep-seated fractures in its justice system. A 28-year-old woman, a white investment banker, went for a jog in Central Park. She was later found brutally assaulted, left for dead. The city was outraged, the media descended, and the police were under immense pressure to find the culprits. The case would become known as the Central Park Jogger case, but the story that unfolded is far more complex and tragic than the headlines suggested. This is the story of the Central Park Five. The night of the attack, April 19, 1989, the NYPD rounded up a group of about 30 teenagers from Harlem who were in the park. They were accused of being part of a wilding spree, a term sensationalized by the media to describe youths running amok, harassing and assaulting people. From this group, police zeroed in on 5 teenagers, Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salaam, Raymond Santana, and Korey Wise. They were all black and Latino, aged between 14 and 16. What followed was a nightmare of coercion and injustice. The boys were interrogated for hours, some for over a day, without their parents present for most of the time. They were deprived of food, water, and sleep. Detectives used lies, threats, and false promises to wear them down. They were told that if they just confessed, they could go home. They were told their friends had already implicated them. Scared, exhausted, and confused, 4 of the 5 boys eventually gave videotaped confessions. These confessions were riddled with inconsistencies. The boys' accounts of the crime didn't match each other, nor did they align with the physical evidence from the crime scene. They got details wrong about the location, the weapon used, and the victim's injuries. For example, some described the victim being stabbed, but she had no stab wounds. It was clear to anyone who looked closely that these confessions were unreliable, likely fabricated under duress. Despite the glaring problems with the confessions and a complete lack of physical evidence, no DNA, no fingerprints, no blood evidence linking any of the 5 boys to the victim, the prosecution moved forward. The case went to trial in 1990, split into 2 separate trials for the 5 teens. The courtroom was a media circus. The boys were vilified in the press, portrayed as a wolf pack of feral youths, a symbol of the city's decay. Even powerful figures, like a certain real estate mogul, took out full-page newspaper ads calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty for these kids. The prosecution's case rested almost entirely on those coerced confessions. The defense attorneys argued passionately that the statements were forced and unreliable, pointing out the numerous contradictions and the absence of any forensic evidence. But in the climate of fear and racial tension that gripped New York at the time, their arguments fell on deaf ears. The jury, swayed by the emotional weight of the confessions and the intense public pressure, convicted all 5 teenagers. Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salaam, and Raymond Santana were convicted of charges including assault and robbery. They were sentenced to 5 to 10 years in juvenile detention and prison. Korey Wise, who was 16 and tried as an adult, was convicted of sexual abuse and assault and received the harshest sentence, 5 to 15 years in an adult prison. He would spend nearly 13 years behind bars, much of it in some of New York's most dangerous facilities, like Rikers Island. For over a decade, the 5 maintained their innocence from behind bars. Their families fought tirelessly, filing appeals and trying to keep their story alive, but the system that had failed them once continued to fail them. They served their time, forever branded as criminals for a crime they did not commit. They lost their childhoods, their reputations, and their faith in justice. Then, in 2002, a bombshell. A convicted murderer and serial rapist named Matias Reyes, who was already serving a life sentence for other crimes, confessed to the Central Park Jogger attack. He wasn't just confessing, he provided details about the crime that only the true perpetrator could have known. His DNA was a perfect match to the semen found at the crime scene, the same DNA that had been tested years earlier and had excluded all 5 of the convicted boys. Reyes's confession was a thunderclap. He stated that he had acted alone and had never met the Central Park Five. Everything he said corroborated the innocence the 5 men had proclaimed for years. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office launched a new investigation. Faced with the undeniable DNA evidence and Reyes's detailed, unsolicited confession, they had no choice but to confront the truth. In December 2002, a state Supreme Court justice vacated the convictions of all 5 men. The motion was made by the district attorney's office itself, a rare admission of a catastrophic error. After years of being called monsters, Antron, Kevin, Yusef, Raymond, and Korey were finally exonerated. They were no longer the Central Park Five, they were the Exonerated 5. But freedom didn't erase the scars. They had spent their formative years in prison. They came out into a world that had moved on without them, carrying the heavy burden of their wrongful conviction. They had to rebuild their lives from scratch, dealing with the trauma of their ordeal and the stigma that lingered despite their exoneration. In 2003, the five men filed a civil rights lawsuit against the city of New York for malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, and emotional distress. For over a decade, the city fought the lawsuit, refusing to settle. It wasn't until 2014, under a new mayoral administration, that the city finally agreed to a settlement of approximately $41 million. While a significant sum, it could never truly compensate for the lost years and the profound injustice they had endured. Raymond Santana famously said, "You can't put a price on a childhood." The story of the Exonerated Five is a powerful and painful reminder of the flaws in our justice system. It highlights the dangers of trial by media, racial profiling, and coerced confessions. It shows how public pressure and systemic bias can lead to devastating miscarriages of justice. Their case forced a reckoning in New York and across the country, leading to reforms in police interrogation techniques, particularly involving minors. Today, the Exonerated Five have become powerful advocates for criminal justice reform. They share their story to shine a light on wrongful convictions and to inspire change, so that what happened to them will not happen to others. Their journey from vilified teenagers to exonerated men is a testament to their resilience and their unwavering fight for the truth. It's a story that we should never forget, a cautionary tale about the fragility of justice and the human cost when it fails. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into historical events, and share this story so that the lessons from the Exonerated Five struggle are never lost. See you next time.